It just took one German man to bring down the most legendary motorcycle brand in America with over 100 years of cultural momentum. And the damage this time is so deep that it feels like bikers may never trust it again. No doubt, this man pulled Puma from the ashes and turned it into a global beast. But was he really so blind that he couldn't tell the difference between a sneaker and a steel machine? And now the real question is, how did America's most iconic motorcycle brand end up in the hands of a man who didn't even speak its language? The answer lies in Jochen Zeitz, the man who was first brought onto Harley Davidson's board in 2007. It didn't look like a dangerous move back then. It was just another outsider added to the table. But over time, his presence grew. And when he was appointed CEO in 2020, the direction of the company shifted fast. Harley wasn't being led by a lifelong rider or a builder. It was now in the hands of someone who built his career selling sneakers. And no doubt Jochen Zeitz was best known for rescuing Puma, turning it from a struggling athletic brand into a global fashion player. And that's exactly why he was hired. The board was looking for someone who could clean up the balance sheet and talk fluently in investor calls. And that's where everything started falling apart. Zeitz began reshaping Harley from the inside out. One of his biggest pushes was to shift Harley into a premium lifestyle brand. That meant focusing on high-end products, pushing sleek design over function, and trying to sell motorcycles the same way Puma sold sneakers, with brand positioning, not community. But Harley's not a lifestyle. It's a culture. It's garage meetups, patch jackets, and road scars. You don't sell that experience like a limited edition hoodie. What made it worse was the timing. This wasn't 2015 with booming consumer confidence. This was a market weighed down by inflation, layoffs, and high interest rates. Zeitz's plan to go premium meant pushing bikes $20,000, even $30,000. The top-tier CVOs pushed past $100,000 with dealer markups. These weren't bikes for riders. They were showroom trophies for people with investment portfolios. And for everyday riders, there was nothing left to reach for. This was a brand that used to bring people in through models like the 500 and 750. Affordable, entry-level bikes that got people hooked for life. Zeitz killed them off under the Rewire plan. With them went the last on-ramp for new riders. No beginner-friendly models, no $8,000 Harley to grow into. Just oversized machines for oversized wallets. Even inside the company, the energy began to drain. Reports from the factory floors and showrooms started sounding the same. Disengagement, confusion, burnout. Employees and dealers didn't know who they were selling to anymore. The identity that made Harley magnetic was being stripped away, piece by piece, from the top down. And the more Zeitz talked about modernization, the less connected the brand became to the people who had kept it alive for decades. And do you know what was the last nail in the coffin? No, it wasn't the electric bikes. It wasn't even the sky-high prices. It was those diversity statements in fine print where our smart CEO signed Harley into one of the most aggressive corporate DEI pushes in the industry. All at once. Pride sponsorships, LGBTQ entrepreneur boot camps, internal allyship, training, supplier diversity pledges. Harley went from leather and engine grease to HR handbooks almost overnight. The riders didn't hate progress. They hated being told their culture needed replacing. To understand why the backlash was so sharp, you have to understand who Harley's customers really are. They're not corporate executives or Gen interns sipping matcha in co-working spaces. They're mostly over 50, mostly working class, and mostly American to the core. These are the people who've treated Harley as a second skin for decades. Tattoos, road trips, garage meetups. The company joined over 500 corporations in signing the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion pledge, updated all its internal policies, and blasted it across investor decks like a badge of honor. Harley didn't just participate in the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index. It bragged about scoring 90%. In the corporate world, that's a gold star. In the biker world, that was gasoline on a fire. And what is hilarious is that Harley Davidson told the world it was hitting reset, and they called it the Rewire Plan. Yes, over 700 employees were cut, entire departments dissolved, and long-time staff were handed quite severance packages with no real explanation. Internally, the company spun it as a shift toward efficiency. On the ground, it looked like a gutting. Factory floors lost their rhythm. Experienced teams vanished overnight. And honestly, it felt like the reset didn't just remove people. It removed Harley's connective tissue. The most painful blow came with the quiet death of the Street 500 and 750 models. For years, these two models had been the first ride for thousands of young or first-time riders. They were affordable, lightweight, and crucially, they were accessible. With their disappearance, Harley shut the door on entry-level riders across the board. The irony: Harley didn't even try to replace them with anything new. What the board called simplifying the product line felt to customers like watching history being deleted. Harley once prided itself on being more than a company. It was a culture, and these small models were its welcome mat. When they disappeared, that message was loud and clear: "This isn't for you anymore." Customers didn't just lose choices. They lost their point of entry. And Harley didn't seem to care who that decision left behind. And once you close the door on your future, who's left to walk in? Harley pulled out of several international markets, slashed SKUs, and pushed fewer bikes through fewer channels. Morale at factories hit a wall. Workers described the environment as hollow. Showrooms stopped rotating inventory. Sales teams that once knew every bike spec like gospel were now spending more time explaining what they didn't have than what they did. The heart of Harley wasn't just bleeding. It was being boxed up and shipped out. And while Rewire drained the light of Harley's core, the next plan made sure to keep the gate locked. Hardwire was supposed to be the bold follow-up. No more triage. This time, Harley was going all in. But what it really meant was doubling down on the most expensive, least accessible parts of the business. Touring bikes, trikes, high-end cruisers, and full-blown lifestyle packages became the new face of Harley. And with that shift, the price tags ballooned. Base models now floated around $28,000, and once you added accessories, custom paint, or anything with CVO on the label, you were staring down $40,000, $100,000. But if you thought alienating your base was bad, Harley's next move confused even its own dealerships. In 2021, Harley spun off its electric motorcycle initiative into a completely separate brand, Livewire. On paper, it looked innovative. In practice, it was chaos. The Livewire bike wasn't bad in terms of engineering. It just had no place. It didn't rumble. It didn't shake. It didn't even make a noise. At $23,000, it was more expensive than most people's cars, and for what? A silent, smooth, culturally detached version of a Harley that didn't carry the name on the tank. But what hit harder than the price was the confusion. Harley said the spin-off was to protect its heritage, but the move ended up tearing it apart. Long-time fans didn't know whether Livewire was Harley's future or a separate experiment. Younger riders didn't trust it either. It looked like a tech product pretending to be a bike. Dealerships were saddled with inventory they couldn't move. Some admitted to having Livewire units collecting dust for years. Mechanics weren't trained. Sales staff had no script. And worst of all, no one seemed to know who the bike was for. The result, a $180 million investment that sold fewer than 3,000 units total since launch. By the time Jochen Zeitz finished implementing his vision, Harley Davidson dealerships across America were already silent. Places like Fullerton, once packed with test rides, weekend barbecues, and first-time buyers snapping photos next to their dream bikes, turned into retail graveyards. Staff who once spent their days scrambling to keep up with foot traffic were now polishing helmets and rearranging shelves just to kill time. And when riders stop showing up, it means something bigger than just sales has died. Harley tried to react. They pushed promotions, offered free jackets with purchases, rolled out prepaid service plans, zero-down financing deals, all the tricks. But nothing worked. The strategy failed not because the deals were bad, but because the product no longer had a pulse. Riders didn't want to be bribed. They wanted to feel connected to something real, something gritty, something Harley once stood for. But under Zoots, that feeling had been sterilized, replaced by showroom polish and corporate phrases. What good is a dealership when even the loyalists don't recognize the logo anymore? The deeper problem was identity loss. For decades, Harley dealerships weren't just sales points. They were cultural hubs. You didn't just buy a bike there. You met your riding group. You shook hands with old-timers who'd been riding since the 70s. You brought your kid in on weekends to dream about their first Harley. Zeitz didn't just lose business. He erased all of that. Dealerships became cold, quiet, and corporate. The soul of the showroom was gone. Each closure wasn't a location lost. It was a funeral for a culture. The people who noticed the first were the staff. Salespeople who had spent 10, 15, even 20 years behind the counter described it the same way the noise stopped. Test rides vanished. First-time buyers became rare. The excitement that used to come with every new model had turned into awkward silence. Mechanics who once worked full schedules now themselves cleaning workbenches just to fill hours. The passion was gone. And worse, no one at the top seemed to care, and no one in Millwake seemed to understand what they'd actually destroyed. The remaining dealerships tried to hold on, but they were now pushing oversized, overpriced machines to a shrinking audience. Younger riders weren't even bothering to step in. Older riders were disillusioned, and the few who did come in, they weren't buying. The community was fragmented. The identity was confused. The loyalty evaporated. All because the one person at the top thought Harley should sell like Puma sneakers. And that one decision left America's most iconic motorcycle brand gasping for air. The final insult. Many of the shuttered locations didn't even get a real send-off. That's how Harley treated its legacy under Zeitz. Quietly closed it down and hoped no one noticed. But people did notice, especially the ones who kept the culture alive for decades. Now tell me, do you also think Harley lost its soul because of one CEO? Or did we all stay silent too long while they erased everything this brand used to stand for?